Wake up! It's the Saturday Morning Podcast. Let mom and dad sleep in and come back with me to the 80s. Let's grab a bowl of Golden Puffs or Apple Cinnamon Cheerios and flip on the tube. I've got the TV guide and hours of nothing to do. My name is Chris, and I love all the Saturday morning cartoons. When I was a kid, I lived for Saturday mornings. Now that I'm an adult, I want to relive all those great shows and see where they came from. Let's take a deep dive back to the 80s and see what's waiting. Rewind! The great outdoors. A quiet place to get away from it all and de-stress. If you were a kid in the 80s, maybe you went to summer camp. And who didn't go to a camp led by a major Hollywood Canadian comedian? While there have been many to choose from Dan Aykroyd to Eugene Levy, there is only one that took us to Lake Cacciatore and the Gemiguchi Woods. So let's load up our backpacks with supplies and hike out to explore the world of Camp Candy.
The bee bites, the bark of the tree bites, the quietness of darkness, the stories told by firelight, the long nights, the food fights, a summer made of memories at Camp Candy. The moonlight, the sunshine, the rainy days and wet nights.
In the fall of 1989, NBC launched Camp Candy in the 8:30 time slot. The ads let us know that the stars of the NBC Saturday morning lineup, both old and new, were enjoying their last day of summer vacation. They were camping under the stars, of course, because this was a tip of the hat to Camp Candy. The camp itself was set in the wilderness by Lake Cacciatore. Was it in the US? Was it in Canada? Don't know, but I'm sure it was in North America, so we'll go with that. The camp proper consisted of the usual cabins, mess hall, infirmary, ponds, fishing holes, and spooky forest. Did I say spooky? I meant regular forest that doesn't come to life at night when no one's looking. Camp Candy is a summer camp that's led by lead counselor and camp namesake, John Candy. John likes to lead the kids on adventures, and then stop to reminisce about that time something more interesting happened. He launches into stories about past campers and tells tales of camp stuff. Among the group that makes up the camp staff is Nurse Molly. She's got a huge crush on John, but he's oblivious. Molly is stationed in the infirmary and waiting for any and all disasters that could befall the kids, or more likely, John in the forest, or the ponds, or from the monsters. While Candy doesn't notice Nurse Molly, it's because he's obsessed with catching the attention of Miss Sweetingham, the camp's redhead receptionist. She doesn't know that John exists, so Candy is left pining away. The key to everything that happens at Camp Candy is the kids. We have Robin McLean, a girl who loves to be outside. She came to the camp to enjoy nature and be closer to the earth. Alex Dawson is a redheaded tomboy that gets in it with the boys to mix it up. Vanessa Van Pelt is, as you can imagine by the name, snobby. She comes for money and never lets anyone else forget it. Because she's got the bucks, she sports the name brands. She's stylish and into fashion. On the boys' side, we have Iggy Jones. Iggy is a hypochondriac convinced he's got one disease or another. He seems to be afraid of everything, from the forest to the water. Iggy wears glasses and will often fight with his younger brother, George. Though no one calls George, George. He goes by the nickname Binky and is more adventurous than his older brother. Finally, the youngest member of the camp is Rick Quimby. He's got an ego and an attitude and has been known to prank the other campers and John, getting himself into trouble. John Candy came into the land to build the camp when he worked out some kind of deal with Xavier DeForest III. Rex, as he's known, is a suit-wearing, mustache-twirling villain that's scheming to get the land back from Camp Candy. Yes, he's actually scheming. He's like Lex Luthor in the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, always delving into real estate. Rex wants to build condos where the camp is, but his plans are constantly thwarted by Candy and the gang. As with any good villain, Rex employs a greaser named Chester to do his dirty work. It was never clear if Chester was an actual greaser. I don't know if he's got a gang or what. It could just be that he likes John Travolta so much he lives the greaser lifestyle. Also, for a gang name, going by Chester is pretty ballsy. He'll fit right in with the other gang members like Big Boy, Zitty, and Bloody Batman. Across the way is another summer retreat, Camp Kickboot. Run by the strict disciplinarian Hob Nails, Kickboot and their kids try to humiliate Camp Candy, but end up humiliated themselves. Oh yeah, and Nails is blustery and full of steam, but deep down, he's a coward at heart. In the 1980s, John Candy was one of the most popular character actors to appear on the big screen. He was everywhere and usually played a lovable sidekick. He did this in Splash opposite Tom Hanks and in Spaceballs opposite Bill Pullman. Coming from a comedy background, Candy was the guy you knew would make you laugh when he came on the screen. I can't find the exact reason why Camp Candy was created. Maybe it was to capitalize on the fact that Candy was popular with both kids and adults and would bring in an established audience on Saturday morning. Maybe John Candy liked camping. As a Canadian, maybe he wanted us to remember that Canada invented camping as a sport. Whatever the reason, this show was created around Candy by Joel Andrick, Ellen Levy, and Phil Harnage. Joel Andrick started his career in the early 1980s as a researcher for the game show Blockbuster. A year later, he became a researcher for the game show Password Plus. Camp Candy appears to be the first time that Andrick was responsible for creating and writing a show, and that started his career in writing and producing. Ellen Levy started as a supervising producer for The New Archies in 1987. She quickly created the game show I'm Telling in the same year, and the TV-based trivia game for kids, Couch Potatoes. I'm Telling was like a newlywed game for siblings. It aired on NBC and even got a mention on an episode of ALF as cross-promotion. Maybe it was the NBC connection that got her the assignment to develop and create Camp Candy. Finally, Phil Harnage started in animation in 1984 on Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. He was a writer who quickly moved on to He-Man and She-Ra and was head writer on the 1987 series Hello Kitty's Fairy Tale Theater. At the time he was tasked with helping to create Camp Candy, he had worked on NBC's show Alf Tales. While working on Camp Candy, Harnage seems to have been working on several other shows at the same time. His credits list The Legend of Zelda, the new Super Mario Bros. Super Show, and Ring Raiders, all in 1989 when Camp Candy hit the airwaves. These three producers, Andrick, Levy, and Harnage, came together with comedian and movie star John Candy to create a world where Candy's comic skills would shine. Maybe Candy did have an affinity for camping as a Canadian. Perhaps as a child he had fond memories of summer camp and wanted to capitalize on his own nostalgia. Or perhaps it was because of the summer camp trend in movies that sporadically appeared throughout the 80s. The theme of stories taking place at summer camp was a popular one from 1980 to 1989, ranging from comedies like Gorp to the horror genre like Friday the 13th. Camp was the place to plop a story and let your characters go. Who could forget a camp masterpiece like Meatballs Part 2, or the Michael J. Fox vehicle Poison Ivy? By the end of the decade, there was Sleepaway Camp and Cheerleader Camp. Even Ernest went to camp, so everyone else was too. The camping genre was its own thing in the 1980s, much like the overused genre of two people switching bodies for a day. I'm looking at you like father like son. In 1989, maybe John Candy had camping on his mind. After all, he and Dan Aykroyd had scored a moderate hit with the Universal Studios film The Great Outdoors. And that movie took place, you guessed it, in the Great Outdoors. It was about camping. It could very well be that Candy thought of the idea during that time, or suggested it to the creators, or maybe they ran with the camping angle because of the Great Outdoors. If John Candy was in a camping movie and then star in an animated show about camping, maybe people would link one to the other. Whatever the case, they locked into the summer camp culture of the 1980s and they were off. Now, all they had to do was assemble the perfect cast. The number one on the call sheet for Camp Candy was, obviously, John Candy. Born on Halloween 1950 in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada, John Franklin Candy was born to Catholic parents. His father, Sidney, was of English and Scottish descent. His mother, Evangeline, had Polish and Ukrainian ancestry. When John was just 5 years old, his father suffered a fatal heart attack at the age of 35. While in high school, Candy dreamed of becoming a professional football player. Unfortunately, he sustained a knee injury that cost him his athletic career. He would go on to study journalism in college and then seek higher education at McMaster University. It was while at McMaster that Candy discovered acting, took to it, and developed his talent into a skill. In his early 20s, Candy started to get guest starring roles on various television shows. In 1974, he was a regular on the series Dr. Zonk and the Zunkins, co-starring Gilda Radner. The show was canceled but allowed Candy to work on other projects with Dan Aykroyd and Rick Moranis, both of which were up and coming. In 1976, as part of the Second City comedy troupe, Candy became part of the cast of the sketch comedy show SCTV, which was picked up by NBC in 1981. Just prior to this, Candy took a break from SCTV to focus on roles in movies. He would appear in The Blues Brothers and 1941 with his friend Dan Aykroyd. The first big role Candy had where theater audiences really took notice of him was in Stripes. And then he was that security guard in National Lampoon's Vacation. While that might have seemed like a small part, Candy played the bumbling security guard to perfection. He was one of those guys that you knew would be funny when he got on screen. Vacation was also Candy's first time working with writer John Hughes, but it would not be his last. The 1980s were good to John Candy. He found success in Splash, Little Shop of Horrors, and as Barf in Spaceballs. He would work with John Hughes on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, She's Having a Baby, and The Great Outdoors. At the time Camp Candy was released, Candy was the star and title character of the John Hughes hit movie Uncle Buck. Kiara Zani, cast as tomboy Alex Dawson, had starred in the animated TV special Little Golden Bookland as the Pokey Little Puppy. She started performing as a voiceover artist at the age of 10 or 11 and won her role on Camp Candy around the same time as Bookland. Born in Vancouver, Canada in 1978, she wanted to perform from the time she could walk and talk. Valerie Bromfield, cast as Nurse Molly, came to Camp Candy the same way John Candy did, by performing and writing on SCTV. She also had acting credits on the John Candy films Nothing But Trouble and Who's Harry Crumb. Coming up through Second City TV, Bromfield also worked with fellow Second City alum Dave Thomas as an actress. She also crossed paths with John Hughes when she had a role in the 1983 hit movie Mr. Mom. Louis Arquette was born in December of 1935 in Chicago, Illinois. Cast as Xavier Rex DeForest III, Arquette started working as an actor in 1965 with the movie The Very Naked Canvas. He wouldn't find steady work until the mid-70s when he started to appear in episodic television such as Alice and The Man from Atlantis. Arquette would be featured in an episode here and there. He would, however, go on to guest star in 11 episodes of The Waltons as Jefferson Davis J.D. Pickett. His first voice role came in 1984 with The Challenge of the GoBots, providing additional voices. As his career went on, he seemed to alternate between live action and animation. By the time he got to Camp Candy, he had been on A Pup Named Scooby-Doo and Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, among others. Danny Mann, cast as Rex's right-hand greaser man Chester, started his career in animation a decade before Camp Candy in Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo. In all the years in between, Mann worked as a voice artist and appeared on a ton of shows. He would work on Heathcliff, The Transformers, and The Real Ghostbusters. When I looked into the rest of the cast of child actors, I found most of them had Camp Candy as their first credit. And, while not in the pilot, Camp Candy also boasted the vocal talents of Chris and Jennifer Candy, the real-life son and daughter of John Candy. After these messages, we'll be right back with the premiere of Camp Candy.
Camp Candy will return after these messages.
I had a problem. My older brother was always swiping my Eggo waffles. So I invented the Eggo Keeper. I modified this toaster to create a specific trajectory to propel my Eggo directly onto my plate. Consequently, I never have to Lego my Eggo.
Eggo waffles from Kellogg's. Taste too good to let go. Part of this complete breakfast.
My invention is an Eggo protector. My dad was always taking my Eggos.
Easy playing peek-a-boo and rolling round and round for you. Bouncing babies, bouncing babies. At the table when they eat or when they cruise in their car seats. Bouncing babies, bouncing babies.
Bouncing babies are so busy with so many things to do, like playing rollover or even peekaboo. Batteries not included. Bouncing babies really do roll over or play peekaboo, dolls sold separately with accessories.
From Kaboo.
Tastes great, Captain.
Did you hear that? Let's snatch that tasty sweet crunch. Now hear this, you soggies. Cap'n Crunch is a crunchy sweet part of a balanced breakfast.
The wind-up and the pitch.
Captain Crunch baseball cards and bubble gum.
They're free. You can get 2 of these 22 superstars on Cap'n Crunch baseball cards, plus bubblegum and each specially marked box of Cap'n Crunch cereal.
We now return to Camp Candy.
If you watched the premiere of Camp Candy, the date was September 9th, 1989. George H.W. Bush was the President of the United States. America was listening to Hangin' Tough by the New Kids on the Block, the #1 song in the land. Moviegoers excitedly went to the theaters to see Pauline Collins and Tom Conti in Shirley Valentine. On the TV guide was the fall preview. The 1989 season premiered such future classics as Family Matters, Major Dad, and Baywatch. If you were a kid in 1989, maybe you got up early and got yourself breakfast. Maybe you had a new cereal, like a bowl of apple cinnamon O's or Batman. The episode, The Forest's Prime Evil, starts with a shot of the camp and the chirping of crickets. High up in the mountains around the camp, a bear tries to sleep with a beehive spilling honey as bees sting the bear in the hindquarters. It wakes the bear and he slams his head into a tree branch above. Of course, if I woke up and John Candy was singing to me, I'd slam my head into a tree branch too. Down at the camp, camp counselor John Candy wakes at dawn, stretches, and then floats on air to the mess hall with the smell of food calling him. I don't know about you, but skipping the disgusting food at camp was how I lost weight. Every meal was meat covered in gravy, even the cereal. John slams his booty onto the mess hall bench and the whole table quakes. Nurse Molly is flung into the air and she lands on Candy's lap. Candy's face is covered in food with fried eggs for eyes. Outside, a happy camper launches from a ramp over the camp pond. The camper grabs onto a boat and starts to water ski. Panning over the campground, we find the bear from the beginning lounging in a hammock. and a hang glider making a strafing run over the campers, soaring like Mighty Mouse. Water skiing, hang gliding, lounging, sounds like the best camp ever. Candy and the kids make their way over a rope bridge and into a cave. They come face to face with that bear, and the campers run for their lives. Back on the rope bridge, it breaks a la Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, and the kids fall screaming to their deaths. Nope, wait, they all survive. The woodland creatures are judging them on their abilities to stick the landing. The lowest score is an 8, so this is the best rope bridge Olympics I've ever seen. Candy and the kids do indeed stick the landing. They were apparently thrown off the bridge and over to the camp's geyser, where the spewing blowhole helps to break the fall. Candy lands in the middle of the flow, catching all the kids. I guess that's worth an 8. If that's worth an 8, what's worth a 10? When all is said and done, we find the campers and staff of the camp with the bears and wildlife of the forest in a sing-along. You think bears were in the brochure? Because if they were, what does that say about the parents who sent their kids there? Anyways, welcome to Camp Candy. We find camp counselor John Candy on the banks of a river, teaching new campers how to build a campfire. Candy gets the flames going and then manages to catch his hat on fire. He finally douses the flames in the river and danger is averted. 30 seconds in, and the main counselor almost sets the camp on fire. It's always exciting at Camp Candy. Almost setting things on fire reminds Candy of a story, and we flash back to a group of campers better than the ones Candy's stuck with now. Candy tells the campers of a day not so long ago when everything was perfect. At the flagpole, John's blowing reveille on his trumpet. You know what's not perfect about this day? John Candy's trumpet pitch. Also, the grass around the flagpole looks like a Pac-Man ready to eat the wooden post. As Candy raises the flag, he extols the virtue of raising the flag. And then he realizes that the white and red of the flag isn't for the Canadian maple leaf, but is his white boxers with red flowers on it. At least they don't show the train tracks on the backside. Camper Rick asks Alex for a high five since the flagpole prank was his joke. In that counselor-y fashion, Candy tells Rick that he needs to stop the practical jokes because someone's going to get hurt one day. And I bet that'll be the moral of this episode. Sure, it might end with a dead body, but Rick will learn his lesson. As if giving a poor man's one to grow on wasn't enough for Candy, we find little Binky climbing the flagpole. One wrong move, and this kid'll fall. He's gone up the pole to get John's underwear back. Couldn't they have just reversed how they put it up there? Candy encourages Binky to come down and then backtracks. In the name of comedy, Candy climbs the pole to retrieve the kid. John tells Binky to stay where he is, making him a flagpole sitta years before Harvey Danger. The pole looks so sturdy, I don't think Thundar himself could bring it down. But with Candy and Binky on it, it snaps like a twig and comes crashing to the earth. The pole crushes John Candy and kills him in a spurting bloodfest. Rick will never pull another joke again. In fact, he's so freaked out that he goes to live in a cave with the ambition of growing a really long beard. Nope, wait, John Candy's fine, no noticeable injuries. Still, he should have Nurse Molly do some x-rays for internal bleeding. It would be embarrassing if he farted out a trail of blood in the mess hall. John realizes that Binky is nowhere to be seen. Relax, he's fine. Binky's slowly descending to the ground using John's drawers as a parachute. He's having a pretty good time too. This should be in the brochure. John gets himself checked out in the infirmary by Nurse Molly. Because a little Molly makes everything better. Wink. Amidst sticking on a bunch of bandages, Molly assumes that John brought down the flagpole to be closer to her. Candy says she's got a little bit of a crush on him. If this were happening today, Molly would totally be stalking his Facebook page. But John's only got eyes for the red-headed counselor, Miss Sweetingham. But Miss Sweetingham doesn't know that John exists. After I saw Who's Harry Crumb, I didn't acknowledge John Candy existed either. When Candy goes for Miss Sweetingham, he leaves a John Candy-shaped hole in the infirmary door and tumbles down the stairs. And Nurse Molly rushes to his side, thinking his pain is an excuse to be with her. If you look real closely, she sniffs his musk. Okay, she doesn't, but you know she wants to. I wouldn't doubt that Nurse Molly can see their future wedding cake with the groom figure sporting crutches on top. Meanwhile, across Lake Cacciatore, there's a mansion, and the show's villain is inside. He's so villainy, I expect him to twirl his mustache. Sporting a toupee from the Shatner collection, he goes by the name Xavier Rex DeForest III. His greaser sidekick is named Chester. Anyone else think he looks like Bones from Saturday Supercade? Bones is a way better greaser name. Chester sounds like he's going to sell you Cheetos or be your butler. Either way, not a greaser. Rex has a model of Camp Candy perfect for hatching his schemes. He also tells us he let Candy build his camp, but now he wants the land back to build timeshare condos. All he has to do is work out a deal with Candy to host those seminars where timeshare people give you free stuff, hold you hostage, and make you agree to sign a long-term contract for the condos. What self-respecting celebrity wouldn't do it? That's how I met Abe Vigoda. Rex grabs a sword off the wall and cuts the camp off the model map and tosses it into the model pond. If he could toss the camp into the pond in real life, I'm sure the Snorks would have a new place to hang out. Down at the camp, Candy is going to teach the kids how to captain a rowboat. While all the kids are wearing life jackets and standing on the dock, Iggy is afraid of capsizing. If rowing's not their thing, maybe John should get Nurse Molly and show them how to motorboat. Anyways, John shows them how to stroke it. The rowboat. This is the most sexually charged Saturday morning show since Winston said happy ending on The Real Ghostbusters. Ever the jokester, Rick ties the boat to the dock to induce John Candy to have a stroke. Vanessa, filing her nails, says she's bored with the whole camping thing. If John's not careful, he's going to have himself a Lord of the Flies situation. Tied to the dock, the boat capsizes, and John Candy nearly drowns. And who should rush in to save him? Little Binky, the binkiest of them all. Older brother Iggy chases his younger brother, trips on the dock, and falls into the water. He imagines a fish to be piranha-like, and it bites his foot. Iggy jumps out of the water, and Robin teases him for being as cowardly as a pup named Scooby-Doo. The group of kids work to pull Candy out of the water. The counselor says he needs to go back to camp because he's feeling woozy. Meanwhile, on the pond shore, the genesis for the late 90s Budweiser commercials start to come together. 3 frogs sit together and invent the game Leapfrog. Imagine if they croaked out, Camp Candy. Meanwhile, at the camp, Chester spies on the campers by peeping in through the window of the boys' cabin. So that's the kind of camp they're running here. And what Chester sees is Binky jumping on a bed, Iggy getting motion sick, and Rick spouting off cliche after cliche. That's some good Saturday morning right there. After Chester's hit in the head by a baseball, he sneaks over to spy on the girls. This show is getting creepier and creepier. Chester finds the girls being girls. Alex does one-arm push-ups as Vanessa styles her hair. On the other side of the room, nature girl Robin is entertaining all the creatures from the Smurf forest. She's got deer, frogs, rabbits, a jackalope, and what looks like a Daffy Duck. Glad to see there's no pillow fights here. That would be stereotypical. Bones, I mean Chester, uses his walkie-talkie to talk with Rex. Rex is on a landline. Isn't that like using a calculator as remote control for your TV? Chester reports that the kids are bored at the camp, and Rex envisions that this will end Camp Candy. No one is causing chaos, the kids are just bored with the downtime. If boredom closed up summer camps, none of them would be open. Iggy tells John he wants to go home. It's all going according to plan. Or something. Candy hatches a plan to turn the camp around. He visits Nurse Molly in the infirmary to find she's dusting a skeleton. I'd make a bone joke, but I think I shot my wad when I said happy ending. John runs an idea past Molly about being out under a full moon and gathered around a campfire. Maybe it's the romantic guitar playing, but Nurse Molly gets the wrong idea and a heart forms around her. Molly's disappointed to know that Candy was talking about getting romantic with the kids. I mean, he wants to be alone in a forest with the kids. I mean, I can't spin this. This camp needs more adult supervision. Leaving the infirmary, Candy catches sight of Miss Sweetingham and falls off his feet. Molly takes it as another romantic gesture. Imagine how giddy she'd be if John cracked open his skull. In the camp's library, John tries to find just the right ghost story for the campout. When a book floats off the shelf, he thinks he's got a winner. John Candy ain't afraid of no ghost. Thumbing through the tome, The Ghost Stories of Lake Cacciatore, he finds the legend of the Gemiguchi Woods. After reading a few sentences of the literal hair raiser, he gets spooked and leaves the library. Gathering the campers, Candy tells them they're going to have a camp out under the stars. If the kids think they hate camping while sleeping in a comfy cabin, what'll they have to be outside in a sleeping bag? Vanessa's packed for the sleepover. She's got a full wardrobe and a light-up makeup vanity. I bet she'd be great friends with Margot on Punky Brewster. Rick's ready for his time in the woods. He's got a late 80s ghetto blaster on his shoulder, just waiting to blow out his eardrums. Out in the forest, Rex tells his demolition foreman to start bulldozing the trees. The foreman's afraid because of Indian spirits. Not only that, but the foreman is called names and then plays under Chester's watchful and idiotic eye. The 80s were such a simple time. You could berate the staff and refer to indigenous people as Indians. Of course, you could also call McDonald's food and Donald Trump a businessman. Oh, how times have changed. With Chester in charge, Rex gets a nest of eggs dumped on him. Guess the yolk's on him. I know, don't email me. The campers hike through the forest with Candy and Molly singing on top of spaghetti. Hearing the campers sing, the beavers stop playing ping pong and turn their table into lumber. Stopping for the night, the campers set up tents and gather around the campfire. Candy asks if the campers had enough to eat. When I was in the Boy Scouts, we could never get enough of the reconstituted beef stroganoff we had to eat on camping trips. You could really taste the reconstitution. Turns out these campers had s'mores for dinner, so they fared way better. John starts to tell the troops a ghost story about the very woods they're in. That's when the forest starts to strobe and the trees come to life. They all huddle around Candy, who looks like he's about to drop a load of knowledge. Candy sees that they aren't ghosts, it's a bunch of tractors. And Chester is in the lead, meaning that Rex is behind all of this. Candy has a plan to dress like a tree to scare the wits out of the demolition team. To save the forest from being torn down, Alex and John cut down a tree. John hollows out a tree and gets in the log. He gets stuck in place as the bulldozers close in with no sign of stopping. From out of nowhere, the trees appear to really come to life, like in the ghost stories. It scares the construction workers off, except for Chester, who rolls onward until a tree grabs him out of his bulldozer. He's now got enough brains to run away. The ghost trees go back to being regular trees. I have to wonder why the trees cared enough to save John Candy. After all, his plan required him to kill a tree and wear its skin like a Halloween costume. This might be the most horrifying thing on 80s Saturday morning. To celebrate, Rick cranks up the ghetto blaster and dances like a white boy in the late 80s. Dodging dangerous bulldozers and encountering ghost trees was so much fun for the kids, they decide to stay, and the camp is saved. And bulldozers and ghost trees should make their way into the brochure. But wasn't the camp already saved if the kids' parents paid for the camp before the kids got there? I don't think they're on a week-by-week basis, are they? Is that how summer camp works? Anyways, no refund. The end. After these messages, we'll look at the show's impact, aftermath, and explore the legacy of Camp Candy.
There's a new chip that's so extra crispy and full of flavor, you don't just eat them, you wanna
Rip into Ripley, there's no holding back. They're so ripping with flavor. Rip into that sack. Rip into them.
Only the Keebler elves could make a rippled potato snack chip so crispy, so rippling good, the word restraint has lost all meaning.
You wanna rip into Ripley?
New from Keebler.
Rip into them, Ripley. Rip into them, Ripley. Rip into them, Ripley.
Ronald McDonald in Red Shoe Review.
Good time. Great taste. That's why this is our place. After you. The good time, great taste of McDonald's.
Good time, great taste. That's why
This is our place.
rubble, rubble.
The good time, great taste of McDonald's.
Hum, hot, hum, tick-tock, keep-up. Hum, hum, cool, hum, tick-tock, keep-up. Hum, hum, dance, hum, tick-tock, keep-up.
Jump in.
Wow.
Good time,
Yeah.
great taste. Oh,
McDonald's. Good time, great taste.
Sunday, it's Video Funnies with Buster Poindexter. The special magic of Harry Anderson and George Burns. 2 hours Sunday at 7, 6 Central.
Just 2 years after Camp Candy went off the air in 1992, its star suffered a heart attack and passed away. John Candy had been working on the film Wagons East with Richard Lewis and was on vacation. Candy went to sleep on March 3, 1994, and was found dead the next morning. Both his father and brother had died at young ages from heart attacks. In addition to this, it is reported that Candy would binge eat when upset, drank a great deal, and smoked a pack of cigarettes a day. His last completed film was Canadian Bacon, a comedy from director Michael Moore. Kiana Zanny, who played tomboy Alex Dawson, continues to act and has been a successful actress all her life. She's appeared in movies like X-Men and Good Luck Chuck. She continues to provide vocals and has performed characters such as Darling Do on My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Kobe in Henry Hugglemonster, and Blair Delaware on Polly Pocket. Zanny is married and cites watching internet cat and dog videos as one of her favorite things. In the years after Camp Candy went off the air, actress Valerie Bromfield, who played Nurse Molly, continued in voiceover work for Popples, Animaniacs, Tiny Toon Adventures, and Superman, the animated series. She served as a supervising producer on the Kids in the Hall television show. As a writer, she wrote for 189 episodes of The Rosie O'Donnell Show from 1997 to 1998. She's credited as writer for an episode of the 2001 TV show Committed, and then her professional credits end. If she is retired, I hope she's in good health and enjoying some quiet time. Louis Arquette, the actor behind Xavier Rex DeForest III, continued to work as a voice artist and live-action actor. He married Brenda Nowak in 1963, and the two stayed married until her passing in 1997. Together, they had 5 children. On February 10, 2001, Arquette died of congestive heart failure at the age of 65. Danny Mann, who played the greaser Chester, has made a career out of providing additional voices to animated projects. He's still active and has worked for all the major animation studios. Working for Pixar, his voice has appeared in Up and works related to the Cars universe. Over at Illumination Studios, Mann has worked on Despicable Me 2 and 3, The Grinch, and The Secret Lives of Pets. Perhaps his most memorable role was that of Ferdinand the Duck in the 1995 hit movie, Babe. Was it a phenomenon? No. Camp Candy ran for 40 episodes over the course of 3 seasons. It aired in both the US and Canada and was a joint effort between those two countries to produce. There was a Camp Candy lunchbox to show off at school. In 1990, Marvel Comics produced a brief comic book series based on the show. It ran for 6 issues running from May to October. The cover price was $1. Other than that, there is little to no merchandise to speak of. I can't say that the show impacted the world in the way that the Smurfs did. Camp Candy closed out the 80s and helped to blaze the way into the 90s for Saturday morning. Looking up information, I can tell it is fondly remembered by people of a certain age. These are the kids of the 80s who grew up realizing how awesome John Candy was as a performer. Whether he was the bumbling guard in Vacation or he was the lovable sidekick Barf in Spaceballs, he was that character you were watching. He was an everyman with the ability to be all of it. Camp Candy may not have changed the world, but it is a great time capsule of that period in entertainment when camping was its own genre, and John Candy was among the funniest people at the height of his comedic career. Camp Candy is also unique in that the main character was a real person and played by that person. Having a Saturday morning cartoon based on a comedian was divergent from the norm. In prime time, at the start of the 1980s, comedians were starting to invade our television screens. The Cosby Show was one of the highest rated programs out there. Then again, Cosby wasn't playing himself. In 1988, the series Roseanne premiered on ABC. The show is based on the stand-up act of comedian Roseanne Barr, specifically her character of the domestic goddess, a theme that carried over into her show. The next year, NBC premiered The Seinfeld Chronicles, destined to have its title shortened to Seinfeld. The show was based on the observational humor of Jerry Seinfeld from his stand-up act. In the years that followed Roseanne and Seinfeld, networks seemed on a quest to find the hottest comedians and give them shows. Tim Allen, Brett Butler, and Richard Jeni are but the tip of the iceberg of the stand-up driven shows that came out in the 1990s. Camp Candy had the same origins. Take a comedian and let him be him on his show. John Candy was a clean comedian. Kids loved him. He was the fun uncle that we all wanted. Candy was a man who oozed heart and compassion. He was safe to be around. He was safe to watch. Your parents liked him, and even if they didn't, they were okay with you watching his movies. Camp Candy was an extension of the man. He was safe to watch on Saturday mornings, and you knew you could trust him in the forest or on the water. The legacy of Camp Candy is that it gives us just a little bit more of John Candy. You can go and watch SCTV or Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and get your John Candy fix. But when you need something different, maybe even something that seems sort of new, there's Camp Candy. It's not the easiest to find, I'll give you that. But it's rewarding just to watch the goofy antics that most Candy fans have forgotten about. It's almost a lost piece of John Candy history, and it's worth it to watch if for nothing more than to remember the man who gave us so many great moments in the 1980s. With the conclusion of Camp Candy, we end the first season of the Saturday Morning Podcast. We thank you very much for coming along on this first trip back through the 1980s. During this premiere season, we look back on each year of the 1980s and examine the Saturday shows that filled in so many morning hours for so many kids. Between now and the start of Season 2, we'll focus on vintage shows about Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. November and December may be a little thin on the main podcast, but we'll keep adding to the Patreon content for all who support us. Just after the start of the new year, we'll be back with the new season and start the ride through the 80s all over again. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for joining us at the Saturday Morning Podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review wherever you get your episodes. If you'd like to drop us a line, please write to satmornpod@hotmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at satmornpod. If you'd like to support us to create more of these things, find us at patreon.com/SaturdayMorn. Supporters will get extra content and a chance to win behind-the-scenes prizes and given email priority. Do you have any vintage Saturday morning memories? Email your story and we could read it on the next episode.